So with mapping, I think mapping is very important for any First Nations that is working in planning or community planning. And the reason why mapping is important is because when you're working in a community, you need to have maps. That's the first thing. You need to have maps. You need to know what your land base is, and you need to know if how you're going to use that land. Some land on a First Nations community is considered recreational, residential. There's different zonings, right, within the First Nations community. So you need to know how you're going to use that, and you need to know if the community is going to accept that. An example is when you're mapping out a hub or a subdivision. We, in our community in Fishing Lake, we have a subdivision, and that subdivision was planned, and it was planned, but it wasn't mapped. And I think that when you're mapping and you're getting the community engagement and you're getting feedback from the community, that they need to know, like, okay, we're planning to build a subdivision and we're planning to put houses here and we're planning for people to live here. So it will affect people because who their neighbor is, how far away the houses are, how big the yard is. So planning is very important and mapping is very important. Another area of mapping that is important is in Fishing Lake, we have a lands manager, and in order to assist him or her, you need to have somebody who is educated in GIS. And the reason why you need to have that technical assistance, because if you do not know how to use GIS and the software, it creates problems, and it creates a gap of information. So, and that gap of information will either be with the people who are working in that area, or that gap of information is it just doesn't exist and it doesn't serve the First Nations without having that knowledge. So if we were planning for example, we have surveyed an area for our school, and if we had aerial shots of that area, and we mapped it out and we planned the school on top of that, at least we would know how it's going to work. And for the most part, this is planning, right? And when you're mapping that out on the community, on the land, at least you know where things are going to go and how it's going to fit and how it will affect like roadways, and how it'll affect whether, like our water, our sewer, all those other things that come into place when you're building infrastructure. Another area in mapping, I went to an Indigenous mapping conference in November in Vancouver, BC, and I was new to this position as a community navigator, and there was 4 community navigators from Saskatchewan that actually attended the conference. All of us did not have any experience in mapping. So when we went to the conference, we had the idea of how are we going to use maps. That was the #1 question. How do you use maps in your community? And how are you going to use this knowledge in your First Nations? One of the things that came up to me that I had some experience, I guess, was this summer we had a culture camp in Fishing Lake, and there was also forest fires in Fort Mac, and our event was happening at the same time. And so what we noticed in Fishing Lake First Nation was it was smoky in Saskatchewan for about 14 days, actually. And we noticed a lot of wildlife coming down into our area that's traditionally not there. Like, we normally don't have bears. And so some bears had migrated into our area. And so we noticed some new wildlife coming into our area. And in addition to that, we actually had our culture camp in the summer, and our hunters went out to hunt, and they hunted an animal, and it was a moose. And this moose actually was sick. It was sick. It had like ulcers and sores, and we've never seen an animal sick like that in our community. And so when we seen this animal, we were all shocked to see this kind of animal in our community, and it was sick. But one of the things we thought about was this could be an animal migrating from this area, like Fort McMurray, because of the forest fire, or the fire, the city fire, I guess it was. And so those are things that we would like to continue to map. Like that was an incident in our community that we needed to collect data on and say, okay, Fishing Lake is experiencing new wildlife in our area, and why are we experiencing this wildlife? Is it an impact of, what kind of impacts is it from?